Today we're going to be talking about the importance of tracking our numbers and what all that means. So I'm going to give you just a little overview of some things we're going to cover. Why is it important for us to track our numbers? What's that going to mean to our business? How do I start? Because most agents don't track their numbers. We'll talk about that a little bit. Are there different systems that we can use to track our numbers? And we're going to be looking at a few of those and discussing the pros and cons of that. How much maintenance is involved, because we're looking at investing our time, which is our most valuable commodity, in tracking our numbers. So how much maintenance is going to be required for this to happen? And how will this help me? Because if this doesn't help you in your business, then you don't need to be doing it. Because, again, time is our most valuable commodity that we have. When we talk about the importance of tracking our numbers, why is it important that we know what our average sales price is? Why is it important that we know what our average days on market? Why is it important to know what percentage of our business came from this particular source? So when you look at all those things, and when I first started learning about tracking my numbers a few years ago, I went to a Mike Ferry event and had never really thought about tracking my numbers. But me being a numbers guy, you give me a spreadsheet and I'm happy. I had never really tracked them. So when I got back from that particular seminar that covered this topic, I went back and got all my numbers together from the past years, and it was amazing to look at a good snapshot of the past 5 years and what I had been doing that I had no clue about. So when I got those numbers together, it really helped me set my goals for the next year, because I seen where I had been, here's where I want to go, and here's what I need to do to get there. So understanding all those numbers helps me establish that goal. The value of knowing these numbers, I know you've been on listing presentations, those of you guys have been agents for a little while, and you'll occasionally get asked that question, how many transactions did you do last year? I've not been asked that very often, but I have been asked it more recently. Knowing what I did last year, what I did the year before, how many transactions I closed, came from me tracking my numbers. They asked me, I went on a listing presentation a few weeks ago, the lady said, what's your average days on the market? And before this, I would have had, I don't know, I sell it as quick as I can. But because I knew these numbers, I was able to tell her that last year in Wilson County, the average days on market for all properties was 73 days. The average days on market for my listings last year was 52. So you can see how knowing that information was very helpful in securing that listing, because I was able to share with her those numbers. So the next question is, how do I start this process? Where do we begin at? I can remember several years ago when I first got into business, putting together systems was one of the hardest things as an agent to do, because there really was no cookie cutter things. You know, you go to real estate school, they teach you how to pass the test, you get to work for your company, and then the broker hopefully teaches you how to fill out a contract, because they didn't teach you that in school. But how do you manage your business? How do you start tracking all this information? So I've spent the past several years trying different systems. I've bought some that we're going to talk about in a minute, and I've also tried to develop my own. I've made some, thrown them away, remade them, made them a little bit better. And so what we're going to be looking at today is some of that, how I made that happen. If you've been an agent for a while, you have some historical data. So you can go back. I went back when I first started doing this and looked at my last 5 years and what I had done. Of course, I had to dig all those files out, go by each file, the date I closed it, what it closed for, what my commission was, who the client was, where that lead came from, and I started gathering all this information. And we're going to look at in a minute my spreadsheet of how we did that over the past 5 years and how it gave us a good snapshot. So if you've got historical data, that is good. If you're a new agent or you're thinking about getting in the business, you have no historical data, that can be good too, because you don't have any bad habits. Because you'll develop those bad habits as time goes on. So that's also a good thing. One thing I would encourage you is that the importance of start tracking your numbers immediately. Some people will be like, well, the first year's coming up, I'll have something in place by then and I'll start tracking my numbers next year. If you've been in the business in a while, you've got your files, go back and pull that information, get that data, see where you've been, see what you've done. I had no idea how many transactions I was doing. and all that helped me set my goals. But you know, when we set a goal in this business, it's like, well, I want to make X number of dollars next year. Well, how are you going to get there? How many transactions it's going to take? What's your average sales price that you've been doing? What are you going to do to get that average up if you need to achieve your goals? So putting all that information together will help you develop that. Then the next question is, what system do I use? With all the choices out there, a lot of agents do their own. They have spreadsheets. I know we used to use Excel on our local computer, which works great. But if I need that data and I'm out in the field somewhere, or I'm at home, or I'm at a client's house on my tablet, I don't have access to that. So we've gone to a web-based Google Docs, which I'm sure many of you have used or heard about, and it works great because you can access it from anywhere, and it's web-based. But when we talk about the different systems, this system here is not really about tracking your numbers, but a lot of agents use this program, Top Producer. I used it several years ago. It's a good relationship with your client type program that helps you know when to send them a birthday card, lets you know when their dog's birthday is. You can send a card for that, which is important to a lot of folks, by the way. You'll score some points with a birthday card for the dog. But it helps you track all that information and send your clients their cards and stay in communication with it. It costs $39.95 a month to use that program. So I'm kind of just throwing that in for an extra measure. If you're not using anything right now as a contact management software, Top Producer is something to consider. I found it a little heavy on the maintenance side. I was spending a lot of time keeping all the data up to date inside of the program, so I wasn't really wild about that. Another program that's out there is called Realty Juggler. I like it better than Top Producer. It does track a little more than Top Producer does in some facets of your business. It's a little more user friendly. It's $99 a year. They give you a free trial if you want to try it for a month or two. But it tracks some information as well. But again, it does not give the average numbers that I was really looking for. So, but you can take a look at it if you want. Act is another content management software. It costs $550 to purchase it. It's very similar to Top Producer. Has some different pros and cons to it, but it's also good to help track your business as far as your database goes. And the last one is what we've taken information from all of these different programs, some from Top Producer, some from Realty Juggler, from ACT, and a whole lot of, over the years, what we have put together that works for us to track our numbers. And we're creating a software called discoveryournumbers.net. Will be the website that it's going to be housed at. We've got a guy developing this for us right now. He's taking all the different systems that we currently have and putting those all in one neat little location where you can track how often you've been in contact with your clients, who's buying from you, where your business is coming from. All the things that we're going to be looking at in a minute on this spreadsheet will be housed inside of this program, and we're going to sell it for $99 a year. It's in its development stages right now, so I don't know how long it'll be before we get that ready to roll out, but the guy that's working on it's told me that he's making some good progress, so hopefully it won't be too long. What I wanted to show you was we're going to take this link to Closing Master that we have. When we do a closing, this is the online, it's free, which we really like that part. And this is, let's see, that's 2009. Let's go to last year. This is last year's information. If you'll notice, it started on the first column there. It talks about, this is where the business came from. We're sourcing the business. Did it come from a past client, from my center of influence, somebody that I know that's on my mailing list, but I've never sold them anything? Is it a sale by owner, an expired, a sign call? Where did that business come from? And then at the bottom, we're going to look at how we're tracking that. Simply put the closing date, MLS number. Some of those we got are non-MLS, address of the property. We have the sales price. Now this column here is your gross commission check. That's the check that the attorney gives your company. When you leave the closing table, you come back and do your split, and this is what you net. This tells you what you're netting from that check. And with me, I give 20% of my check to my company to help run the company, just like I'm an agent, because we have to have money to pay Dawn and Tiffany. This next column is probably one of the most important things that I can tell you today, and that's your taxes. Most agents that get into business have no business background. They thought it would be great to get in real estate, and this is neat, I think I can do this, but there's not a lot of business background there. So what happens is, you get that money and you're like, okay, Uncle Sam, I know he's gonna get this next April, and I'll pay him then, but I'll just wait till then to put it aside. And it has bitten me several times in the past years. April 15th comes around, do my taxes, and there's no way I owe that much money. But I do. And so what this helps do is we take out of every check, when Dawn processes this, like this closing sheet process, this goes into my real estate account, this line here for the taxes, she transfers over into a tax account. She does all this online. Once a quarter, whatever's in that account goes to Uncle Sam. Then when April 15th comes around, I'm not sweating bullets because he's paid. Last year we hit it, I think I owed $105, so we were pretty close. Yes. That was really good. That was really good.
You want to explain what PC, COI,
Yes.
obviously FISBO is, and EX, what all that means?
Yes, those are, we're going to show that down at the bottom in a minute.
Okay.
This is all the sellers that I had last year. I grouped my sellers together and my buyers together so we can tell what's going on with both of those. That's the end of the buyers. This tells me what my volume was with all my buyers last year, how much money I made off those buyers, and how many transactions I had. Then I have another line that starts with the buyers. Same thing goes through there. Now I'm sharing with you some information that, you know, when you go to these events, everybody says, well, what did you make last year? What was your gross commission? It's no secret. If you can ask to any of these agents that you talk with, we'll be glad to share that information. I'm just sharing with you a breakdown of what mine looked like last year. With this program, you can see where I did 77 transactions last year. 54 of those were sellers. 23 of those were buyers. This helps me tell what my total sales were for those two different categories. This is a very important number in our average sale number, because when you're establishing your goals for next year, how much money you're going to make, how many transactions is it going to take to get you there, and then a very important factor in that is what's your average sales price, because that dictates what your commission is. So that gives, you know, my average sales price last year was $156,000. I had sales last year over $1 million. I had one sale last year that was $4,900. That really affected my averages. That pulled it way down. So this kind of puts all that at the forefront of your mind. What is my average sales price? Then when you start listing properties, if you're listing one that's a 19.9 building lot, you've got it in your head what your average sales price is, what you're going to be making on that, and that helps you make a business decision of how you want to handle a smaller listing that's below what you normally work with. So if you want to get this up, you have to work with higher price listings. And this helps keep that fresh in your mind. Our average gross commission, net commission, what my average check is. Now last year my average check between buyers and sellers after company dollars was $3,170.85. So I did 77 transactions last year. That tells me what my average check was last year. When I put my goals together for this year, this gives me some data that will help me pull that together. Now, Matthew mentioned a minute ago on the far left of the screen on the bottom, what COI, PC, what all that means. COI is centers of influence, or it used to be called your sphere of influence. And those are the people that you know, they know you, they're on your mailing list, you're mailing them hopefully 4 times a year, and you're calling them 4 times a year. Those are the people that you want to do business with. The PC is past clients, people that you've done a transaction with, no matter who it is, they're now in that category. Then of course referral, you know what that is. The EX is expired, for sale by owners, and sign calls. When I first started tracking my numbers, I was doing about 50-50 buyers and sellers. Well, what I started realizing was how much time it was taking to work with buyers, which is a whole lot longer than what it takes to complete a closing for a seller. Typically, you've got about 12 hours in a seller. On a buyer, who knows? You may be with them for weeks. My longest client so far has been 2 years before I found them a house. So it takes a lot of time. But you're going to have buyers that you're going to be working with, but you need to manage that time. You might want to refer those out sometimes to other agents if you need to, so you can stay focused on what you're trying to do in listing properties. My goal was to hit a 70-30 split last year. You know, it's amazing when you set a goal and write it down, whether or not you're working actively or mentally towards achieving that, how it just sometimes happens. Last year my split was 70-30, and that was what I wanted to do last year with buyers and sellers. You can see the percentage of, just to the right of the COI, it tells how many of those I did. This is telling me that about 81% of my business is coming from my database and from my past clients. So it helps me realize where I need to be focusing my efforts, but it also helps me realize where's the best opportunity for growth. And that's outside of that circle. So all these things are geared to help you realize those items. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about, and this is really not as much about tracking your numbers, but it's also going to be rolled into this program we're developing. This is, like I said, nothing to do with tracking your numbers, but it's very important information. The systems that we develop over our career to handle from contract to closing, or from the signing of that listing to contract, there's processes that take place. And for most agents, they shoot from the hip. It's a hit or miss. Hope I can follow up with them because I don't really know what all the folder has in it, or I hadn't wrote it, hadn't updated it. So if you don't update this information, you can't effectively communicate with your client, which your client's not going to be happy. And if you get lucky and sell the house, they probably won't use you again. Because the number one complaint among real estate agents is communication. That's the number one. It's nothing else. They didn't call me back. They listed the house. I didn't see them for 6 months. Then it was getting ready to expire, and they called me and told me how great they were and that I should relist with them. So this next section we're going to be looking at is geared towards that communication with clients. It's going to take us back to another spreadsheet that's also part of Google Docs. I'm going to go to a particular one. Let's see what would be a good one. Okay, this is one that we listed back in May the 5th, Cinco de Mayo. We did this listing. Cinco de Mayo, right? 5th of May. This is where we put the seller's information, their address, their emails, their cell phone numbers, the date we listed it, the date it's going to expire, and then we put in here any showings that we've had. When the agent set up that showing, Don goes in here and plugs that information in. When we get follow-up from that, we go in and update that showing. Then we have something to communicate back to the seller. If you don't have some type of system to do this, it's very hard to communicate back effectively back to your seller. So we house all that information here. We shade it in with gray when we've told the seller about it. That way when we go back to this sheet, we're not repeating information that we just told them last week. So it helps keep that up to date. Don colors it in this color if there's a ripple in the water there with that particular client or that particular buyer. That way if we have a price reduction or something in the future, or a contract falls through, we can go back to those colors and call them and say, hey, this house is back on the market. Is your buyer bought anything yet? So this is where we house all the information for that. Any questions on that?
You gonna share your templates?
Do what?
You gonna share your templates?
The template, yeah. It's really not complicated. Now the ones tracking the numbers, we did a little programming there. But these others is just a simple spreadsheet that we just format for the width we want them, the size we want them, wrap the text, and you're up and going. But we'll help you with any of that. Because it's going to be a little while before our software is ready, but we can share this information to help you track. Same thing we've been using. We've got Google Doc here, and it's kind of spread out. We're putting that all into one convenient location to where when you enter that client, it will auto-populate all this other. So you don't have to go in, there's no redundant work going on with it. Things we're talking about tracking our numbers, is it worth all the time that we're putting into it? Because time being the most valuable thing we have, we don't want to waste that. We talk about how useful it is on listing presentations. When we have this readily available at our fingertips, and I've done this before, being going to a listing and I need to refresh my memory about something, I can pull it up on my phone or on my tablet. I can pull that spreadsheet up and refresh my mind with those numbers a little bit if I need to. If I need to look up a client that so-and-so called me and says, hey, the appointment center said you had a 12-hour requirement on your showing. We need to show it in 3 hours. They won't set it up. Can you do anything? I can pull up this information. I've got all their contact data. I can call them and have everything that I need to complete that process. And I hope you can see how this can be useful in managing your business, because tracking your numbers and having systems is what makes successful businesses. You know, when you go into something as simple as McDonald's, they have a system and a process for every single thing that goes on in that restaurant. And being in the real estate business or in the propane business or any other business is really no different. You have systems and processes for everything that you do. We talked about how useful this is in establishing your goals. As I get ready to set my goals for 2015, I'm going to be looking back on 2014 and what I've done that will help me be realistic, but maybe reach a little beyond that for next year. But I've got that data that will help me do that. And I'll end up by saying that it's only as good as it is up to date. If you don't go in and put that data in when you do that closing or when you do that listing, the next thing you know, it's 30 days down the road, you're behind, you got to dig out folders to try to catch it up, and it just becomes a mess. So if it's only as reliable as you putting the data in there. Okay, well that covers all the information. I want to talk to you about tracking your numbers and the processes that we have, so I'll just open it up here to questions.
This is probably a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Taxes, do you, because you said, you said you owed $105 this year. As you put those in your tax account, do you make a payment to the IRS monthly, or how do you pay that up? Because you only got a bill for $105.
Okay, good question. We write a check quarterly
Okay.
to the IRS. Now there are some guidelines you need to check with your CPA about this. If you're making so much money, you need to send it more than once a quarter. You need to send it once a month. And if you send in, I know a lot of times your tax information will be based on last year. If you use a CPA and you don't use this system, they'll say, well, last year you made X number of dollars, so once a quarter just send this much in. And you send that much in thinking,
Maybe more.
I'm okay because I'm doing what my CPA told me to do. End of the year, you wind up making $75,000 more than you did last year. Guess what? You owe Uncle Sam some money. And you might have bought a boat with that money.
Oh, and then sold it a year later.
And then you had to sell it.
You may have.
And
What an
my
example.
wife's here with us today, and she's laughing because that happened.
About 15 years ago.
True stories. CPA told me, don't worry about it. And I called him. I said, now I'm making a little more money than I made last year. He said, don't worry about it. Just send that in. I'll take care of it. I told Terry, I said, we can get us a boat. So we did. And come April, I said, we need to sell our boat. And we did. And we gave it to Uncle Sam. So this way, you're sending in money based on what you're making every quarter. Whatever it is, it is. And if you make less, you're not sending in as much. If you make more, you need to spend more. I've got mine set up to take 20% of my after company dollars check. After the company gets its percentage, here's what I get a check for from the company. I do 20% of that check because I still got all my expenses that comes out of that. All right, if you go to getting in a higher tax bracket, you're probably going to need to raise that percentage because you're going to be in a higher tax bracket. So you can adjust that, and this is going to be set up when we get the software developed to where you can go in and set that default for that tax amount to be whatever you want it to be or whatever you need it to be. Good question, Kyla.
And it is advisable to get a separate account. Don't set that in your real estate
Yes.
account hoping it will stay there and you'll write the check quarterly. It's best to have it in a separate account.
Great point. We have of course I have our company account, we have an escrow account, I have my real estate account, which is my personal business that I do, and then we have a tax account for my personal business. Be sure, if you keep all those separate, your life will be much easier, and your accountant will like you at the end of the year, because you've got it all separated for them, you can hand it to them in a shoebox.
So for the system that you're setting up, if we take and implement the same system right now and put it into Google Docs, is that going to transfer into this new system through the Google Docs?
Yes, there will be where you can,
Upload?
upload bulk information.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, here again, we're the only ones that's using this system because we created it.
Right,
You know, so that'll kind of be local just to here to our company.
right.
But we'll help you get that data into the new software. Other questions?
We get to beta test it first, right?
Do what?
We get to beta test it first.
That's right. You get to test it. There will be some testing going on before we send it worldwide. Absolutely. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank y'all for coming out. We're planning on having these Friday retreats, as we're calling them, the second and fourth Friday of every month. So make plans, put that in your schedule to be here. And I don't know if we're promised Dawn making her homemade recipes, but we'll try to have something good to eat.